crimes.
In other words, to our enemies, F-A-F-O.
Those are the words of a potential war criminal right there. And that is not the advice and counsel and direction that any Secretary of Defense should be providing our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. It puts them actually in greater danger. The Secretary of Defense is a disgraced major that was kicked out of the DC National Guard. He has no qualifications whatsoever to be the Secretary of Defense other than his extreme loyalty to the president. Again, those are the words of...
Did you hear that? A retired U.S. Major General said those were the words of a potential war criminal. That is not random cable noise. That is a military alarm bell. And here is why that matters. Congress already required the Pentagon to run a civilian protection center of excellence. That office exists for one reason, to reduce civilian harm. NPR also reported that Pete Hegseth cut offices and positions focused on civilian casualties. So when leaders brag about removing restraints, Americans should get very nervous, because this is bigger than one ugly soundbite. This is about whether legal and moral guardrails are being ripped away. It is about civilians abroad. It is about troops in danger. And it is about whether the American people are being told the truth. By the end of this video, you will see why this story matters to every family.
The argument is that I, a couple years ago, worked alongside my colleagues to pass into law something called the Civilian Protection Center. This is something that's at the Department of Defense, at the Pentagon, something that has personnel who are focused on this effort of ensuring protection of civilians, of reducing the risks that we see unfold here. The problem, though, is Secretary Hegseth decided to gut this office last year, has dramatically reduced down the staff, not implementing the budget that is necessary. Again, this was a bipartisan piece of legislation passed into law that I helped draft because of this. You know, I worked at the National Security Council. I've been there for targeting packages for a president to approve.
What you just heard is the heart of this whole story. Here is what they are not telling you. This was not some side project. Federal law says the Secretary of Defense shall operate that. Center shall, not maybe, not if convenient, shall. NPR reported that Hegseth cut offices and positions focused on reducing civilian casualties. That means the people asking hard questions about civilian risk were pushed aside. That matters a lot. Now look at what happened next. Reuters reported that U.S. investigators believed it was likely U.S. forces hit a girls' school in Minab. AP later reported preliminary findings pointing to outdated intelligence and a likely American strike. AP also reported that the Pentagon's civilian protection work had been hollowed out. Let me be very clear. An investigation is not a conviction. Intent still matters. Facts still matter. But this is exactly why guardrails exist. Do not weaken civilian harm protections and then act shocked when civilians die. You do not sideline the people tracking no-strike sites and then call disaster unavoidable. That is not strength. That is reckless leadership. This is important because rules of war are not weakness. They protect innocent people. They protect our troops from blowback, and they protect America from moral collapse. What this actually means for you is simple. If leaders cut safeguards, the cost does not disappear. It comes back as grief, outrage, global shame, and endless bills. And once children are dead, no press conference can undo that. Put this document on screen and let viewers read it. The law is plain. The Pentagon is supposed to operate this center. Its mission is preventing, mitigating, and responding to civilian harm. So this is not just a messaging issue. It is a legal and operational safeguard. When that safeguard is weakened, the danger to civilians rises fast.
Thank you. You were talking about Iran a couple times today and what they did after Epic Fury began. You said they hit Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait. Nobody expected that. We were shocked. Are you surprised that nobody briefed you ahead of time that might be their retaliation?
Nobody, no. The greatest experts, nobody thought they were going to hit. They were, I wouldn't say friendly countries. They were like neutral. They lived with them for years. Peter, they were going to take over the Middle East. They were going to knock out Israel with their nuclear weapon. But after we knocked out their nuclear potential weapon, they started building missiles, thousands and thousands of missiles. And they were going to do it with missiles while they developed. These are sick people. while they developed nuclear, somehow they were going to start at a different site because that site was, you saw the site, the mountain. They were going to go into a certain area, which we know.
That clip is devastating, not because retaliation happened. Retaliation was always a risk. What is devastating is hearing the president act blindsided. Reuters reported that Trump was warned that striking Iran could trigger retaliation against Gulf allies. Reuters also reported he was briefed that Tehran could move against the Strait of Hormuz. So when viewers hear, nobody expected that, two possibilities exist. Either the warnings were there and ignored, or the planning was far worse than advertised. Neither answer is acceptable. And this is where the story gets even uglier. Reuters reported the administration was considering more troop deployments and possible missions tied to the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, the public kept getting mixed signals about goals, risks, and how long this would last. I believe Americans deserve better than that, much better. You do not launch military action with fuzzy goals and then improvise when the region explodes. You do not dismiss serious consequences as if nobody could have seen them coming. This is outrageous because ordinary Americans cannot afford that kind of recklessness. Military families cannot afford it, taxpayers cannot afford it, and the country cannot afford another war sold with shifting explanations. Every American should know this. Confusion at the top is not strength, it is danger. Now show the polling. This is where the public is. Reuters and Ipsos found that 59% of Americans disapproved of the war by March 19th. They also found that 65% believed Trump would send ground troops, but just 7% supported a large-scale ground war. That is the real disconnect. The administration talks stuff, the public hears endless risk, and Reuters also reported that energy prices surged as the Strait of Hormuz crisis deepened. So families are watching two things at once, a war with shifting goals overseas and higher costs at home. That is not abstract geopolitics. That is the price of groceries, gas, and basic stability.
Which is bringing gas prices up again. I know it's frustrating, and I know it's hard for people. What I would say to them is we've lost some service members over there who have put their lives on the line to protect us, to protect the region, protect America's friends in the region. We can all, it used to be during the past wars, especially World War II, Americans got behind our servicemen and women, and we did little things to show our support for them. We collected metal, we recycled stuff, aluminum, so that we could, help in the war effort. I think right now, at least just kind of keeping a stiff upper lip. Maybe you take one less trip to Starbucks.
So what did we learn? We learned that military voices were sounding alarms about civilian harm. We learned that Congress created protections that were supposed to stay in place. We learned that Reuters and AP reported evidence pointing to likely U.S. responsibility for the school strike. We learned that Reuters reported Trump was warned retaliation could spread across the Gulf, and we learned that most Americans do not want this war expanded. Then came that final insult. Higher gas prices hit working people, and the answer from the political class is, skip Starbucks. No, that is not leadership. That is passing the pain downward. Supporting troops does not mean giving politicians a blank check. Supporting troops means demanding clear goals, lawful conduct, and honest reporting. Supporting troops means not sending them into chaos built on spin. This is not just about one briefing. It is not just about one strike. It is about whether democracy still requires truth before war, accountability during war, and consequences after failure. I believe the American people are better than this. We do not need more macho slogans. We need facts. We need hearings, we need real oversight, and we need leaders who remember that innocent lives are not disposable. If those guardrails collapse, democracy takes the hit too. That is why your voice matters right now.